You wake up one morning and the person staring back at you in the mirror is a stranger, not because you changed overnight, but because you finally noticed something you have been avoiding for 15 years. The face is yours, the body is yours, but the life, the personality, the choices, the dreams, none of it feels like it belongs to you anymore. And the question that makes your stomach drop is this: when did I become this person? More importantly, who the hell am I really? You have been asking yourself this question for so long that it stopped being a question and became background noise, a constant hum of unease you learned to ignore while you went to work, smiled at people, made decisions, built a life that looks right from the outside but feels wrong from the inside. 15 years. That is how long you have been lost, pretending you know where you are going, pretending you chose this path, pretending the person everyone sees is actually you. And the exhaustion of that pretending is killing you slowly. What nobody tells you about a long-term identity crisis is that it does not feel dramatic. It does not feel like a breakdown or a revelation. It feels like walking through fog that never lifts, like living in a house where you are always a guest, like speaking a language that is not yours, but everyone expects you to be fluent in. You wake up, you perform your role, you go to sleep, and somewhere in the middle of all that performing, you forgot there was supposed to be a real you underneath. Or maybe you never knew who that was to begin with. Maybe you have been constructing and reconstructing yourself based on what people needed from you, what kept you safe, what earned you approval, what prevented disappointment, and now you are 35 or 40 or 28, and you realize you never once asked yourself what you actually wanted, what you actually felt, who you actually were when nobody was watching. Erik Erikson understood something about identity that most people miss entirely. He did not see identity as something you find or discover, like a treasure buried in the sand waiting for you to dig it up. He saw it as something you build through crisis, through conflict, through the terrifying process of choosing who you will be in the face of who you are told you should be. The adolescent years, he said, are when this crisis hits hardest, when you are supposed to figure out your place in the world, your values, your direction, your sense of self. But what happens when you never resolve that crisis? What happens when you made it through adolescence by adopting whoever people needed you to be? And now, decades later, you are still wearing that mask, and it has fused to your face, and you cannot remember what is underneath anymore? That is when the insight hits. That is when you realize the crisis never ended. You just got better at pretending it did. The insight that changed everything for me, the thing Erikson said that broke open 15 years of fog, was this: identity is not about finding yourself. It is about creating yourself through authentic choice in the face of uncertainty. You are not lost because you do not know who you are. You are lost because you have been waiting for someone to tell you who you are supposed to be, and you never gave yourself permission to decide for yourself. The crisis is not the problem. The crisis is the process, and you have been running from the process instead of moving through it. You wanted the answer, the final version, the completed self, and because you could not find it ready-made, you borrowed identities from everyone around you. Your parents' expectations became your ambitions. Your friends' lifestyles became your choices. Your culture's definitions of success became your goals. And none of it was you. None of it came from the inside. You built a life out of external templates, and now you are suffocating inside it. Think about the last week of your life. How many decisions did you make that felt like they came from you? Not from obligation, not from expectation, not from fear of judgment or need for approval, but from some authentic internal compass pointing you in a direction that felt true? If you are honest, the number is probably close to zero. And that is not because you are weak or broken or failing at life. It is because you never learned to check in with that compass. Nobody taught you how. Instead, they taught you to look outward for validation, to measure yourself against external standards, to prioritize being good over being real. And now you are so far removed from your own inner voice that you do not even know what it sounds like anymore. Pause for a moment. Something inside you shifted when I talked about borrowing identities and suffocating inside them. You have been carrying this how long? Years? Your entire adult life? What I need to know, and I need you to be brutally honest with yourself about this, when was the last time someone saw the real you? Not the polished version, not the persona you created to survive, but you, completely emotionally naked and unfiltered. If this hit something deep, comment below exactly these words. I have been pretending to be someone I am not. Copy and paste that, because when you write those words, you are not just freeing yourself. You are signaling to thousands of other people watching this in silence that they are not alone in this invisible prison of performance. Your comment might be the permission someone else needs to stop pretending and start living. Your courage to name this out loud echoes. So, what was Erikson actually saying about identity, and why does it matter to you right now in the middle of this crisis you cannot escape? He said identity forms through a process called identity achievement, which happens when you explore different possibilities and then commit to choices that feel authentic to who you are. But most people skip the exploration part. They move directly from confusion to commitment, not because they found themselves, but because they got tired of not knowing, or because someone told them who to be, or because they needed to make a decision, and any decision felt better than uncertainty. That is called identity foreclosure, and it is what creates the hollow feeling you cannot shake. You committed to a version of yourself without ever exploring whether that version was true. You accepted the first identity that worked, that kept people happy, that looked successful from the outside, and you never asked if it resonated with anything real inside you. The people who look most put together, the ones with the clear career paths and the stable relationships and the confident presence, they are often the most lost because they foreclosed early. They found a role that worked and they never questioned it again. And now, 20 years later, they wake up having achieved everything they were supposed to achieve, and they feel nothing. No joy, no satisfaction, no sense of arrival, just emptiness and the growing suspicion that they built the wrong life. You see this in the executive who realizes they hate their job but cannot leave because their identity is tied to their title. In the parent who loves their children but feels erased by parenthood. In the partner who stayed in the relationship not because they wanted to, but because leaving would mean admitting they did not know who they were without the other person. These are not bad people. They are people who never moved through their identity crisis. They bypassed it. And bypassing it does not make it go away. It makes it grow in the dark until it takes over your entire life. What makes identity crisis so terrifying is that it asks you to sit in not knowing, to admit you do not have the answers, to release the version of yourself you have been performing, and trust that something real will emerge if you give it space. But that space feels dangerous. It feels like falling. So instead, you grip tighter to the mask. You perform harder. You convince yourself that if you just keep going, eventually, it will feel real. But it never does it? Because authenticity does not come from repetition. It comes from risk. It comes from trying things that might not work, from saying things that might get rejected, from making choices that do not have guaranteed outcomes, from letting people see you unsure and unfinished and still forming. And that vulnerability terrifies you because you have been taught your entire life that having it together is the goal, and admitting you do not know who you are looks like failure. But what if not knowing is not the problem? What if not knowing is the doorway? Erikson believed that identity confusion, the state of not knowing who you are, was a necessary stage, not a sign of weakness, but a sign of honesty. Because if you are willing to admit you do not know, you create space to explore. And exploration is how you find what is real. You cannot discover authentic identity by thinking your way to it or by following a blueprint someone else created. You have to try things, fail at things. Notice what energizes you and what drains you. Pay attention to what you do when nobody is watching. Track the moments when you feel most alive. Those moments are clues. They are pointing towards something true underneath all the performance. The version of you that you have been performing was designed for survival, not for thriving. It was designed to keep you safe in your family, to make you acceptable in your community, to help you navigate a world that punishes authenticity and rewards conformity. That version worked when you were younger, when the stakes were different, when you did not have the power or resources to choose differently. But you are not that person anymore. You have power now. You have resources. You have the ability to make different choices. And the version of you that got you here is not the version that will carry you forward. You have to let it die. You have to grieve the person you thought you were supposed to be. You have to mourn the life you thought you were supposed to live. And then you have to step into the terrifying freedom of building something new. People talk about finding yourself like it is a destination, a place you arrive, and then you are done. But identity is not a destination. It is a direction. It is a continuous process of choosing and rechoosing who you are in the face of changing circumstances and new information about yourself. The you at 20 is not the you at 30. The you before loss is not the you after it. The you who has never been challenged is not the you who has survived something impossible. Identity shifts. It evolves. It deepens. And thinking you should have it figured out once and for all is what keeps you stuck. You are not supposed to arrive. You are supposed to keep becoming. So what does it look like to actually move through this? Instead of just surviving it, what does it look like to rebuild from the inside out instead of pasting on another acceptable version of yourself? First, you stop performing for an audience that does not exist. Most of the people you're trying to impress do not care. They are too busy managing their own identity crises to notice yours. And the ones who do care the ones who need you to stay in the box you have been in, they are not your people. They are invested in the version of you that serves them, not the version of you that is real. Second, you start getting curious instead of critical. When you notice yourself doing something that does not feel authentic, instead of beating yourself up for it, you ask why you do it. What need does it meet? What fear does it calm? What would happen if you stopped? Third, you experiment. You try things. You give yourself permission to be bad at something new. You explore without needing to commit immediately. You date different versions of yourself before deciding which one fits. And fourth, you find people who are doing the same work. People who are willing to show up unfinished and uncertain and still forming. People who value honesty over polish. People who do not need you to be someone you are not in order to feel comfortable around you. Those people are rare, but they exist, and they are doing the same thing you are doing right now. They are questioning, deconstructing, rebuilding, and being in community with people who are also becoming makes the process less lonely. It reminds you that this is normal, that not having it figured out is part of the human experience, that you are not broken for being in crisis. You are awake. If you made it this far, something is changing in you now. Something is loosening. And if you want to continue this work, if you want to keep exploring who you are underneath who you were told to be, then this channel is for you. Every week I bring new perspectives on identity, authenticity, and the psychological patterns that keep us trapped in false versions of ourselves. When you subscribe, you are not just accessing more content. You are joining a community of people who refuse to keep performing lives that do not belong to them. People who are willing to step into the unknown and trust that something real is waiting there. We are building something rare here, a space where you can be unfinished and uncertain and still welcome. You are part of this. The insight that ended my 15-year identity crisis was not complicated. It was not a secret technique or a 5-step process. It was permission. Permission to not know. Permission to explore without committing. Permission to admit that the person I had been performing was not the person I actually was. And when I gave myself that permission, everything changed. Not overnight, not magically, but slowly and steadily, I started noticing what felt true and what felt borrowed. I started making choices that scared me because they did not come with guarantees. I started letting people see me uncertain and in process. And the strangest thing happened. The more honest I was about not having it together, the more connected I felt. The more I admitted I was still figuring it out, the more people trusted me. Because everyone is figuring it out. Everyone is uncertain. Everyone is performing at least some of the time. The difference is most people do not admit it. They keep pretending they have the answers, and that pretending creates distance, isolation, the feeling that everyone else knows something you do not. But you do know. You know you are not who you pretend to be. You know the life you are living does not fit. You know there is something real underneath all the performance, something that wants to emerge but cannot because you have been too afraid to let it. And that knowing is enough. That knowing is the beginning. You do not need to have the answers yet. You do not need to know who you will become. You just need to stop pretending you already know. You just need to step into the crisis instead of running from it. You just need to give yourself permission to be unfinished, uncertain, still forming, because that is where the real you lives. Not in the polished version you show the world, not in the resume or the social media profile or the story you tell at parties, but in the quiet moments when you let your guard down and admit you do not know, in the risks you take when nobody is watching, in the choices you make that do not make sense to anyone but you. That is where identity lives. That is where you find yourself, not by searching for some hidden treasure, but by creating yourself one honest choice at a time. You are not lost. You are becoming, and becoming takes time. It takes courage. It takes willingness to look foolish and uncertain and wrong. But it is the only way forward. The only way out of the fog is through it. And you are ready. You have been ready. You just needed someone to tell you that not knowing is not failure. It is the beginning of everything real.